Okay, this is video number 24 and the last in the mollusk series. And we're talking about cephalopods. We introduced them in the last video, just barely, but much as people love nudibranchs and things like that, people really love octopus and cuttlefish and all, and these are quite interesting types of animals. They all swim or crawl, and they all have lots of tentacles, and they're hunters. And so they've got a lifestyle similar to the fish. We're talking about Nautilus, squid, cuttlefish, and octopus. Highly active metabolic rate, and then they've got the amazing ability to change their skin. And I'll put these links up to it on Moodle. Probably should even pause the video and go and check these out on video. But some of the most incredible parts of these things are these things called chromatophores that allow them to change their skin. All right, so here is a nice video of chromatophores. Just so you don't have to type that all in, I'll put the link in as well. But what are chromatophores? It's probably best to go and have a look at the videos now and then come back, and then we'll talk about how they actually work. Okay, good, you're back. All right, so what is a chromatophore? You've seen the amazing skin texture and color changing ability. So a chromatophore is like a patch of skin that has got like a color to it. Let's say this one's a red one, right? And then if we change our color scheme up, red's usually a good color for mussels, but we'll go with black for mussels. So there are these muscle fibers that that uh, attach to that patch of skin, and when these things contract, then what happens when something contracts? Well, it shortens. So the muscle will contract, just like if you contract your bicep in your arm curls up because the bicep is shortened. So when these shorten, then what happens is it pulls the skin patch to be wider, and now the color, the red area, is a lot covers a whole lot more area of the skin, and so you start to see a red color. And those things are called chromatophores, and there are some that actually have two colors where one membrane goes over the other. Pretty amazing, and a characteristic of the cephalopod. So taxonomy for which you're responsible: Nautiloidea is the subclass that includes Nautilus, and they have a outside shell, okay, and lots of up to 75 or 80 tentacles. Okay, then you've got the Coleoidea, which have either no shell or an internal shell that's reduced. So we have squid that have hooks on their tentacles, okay, and they have 10 tentacles. Octopus with 8 tentacles, and cuttlefish with 10 tentacles as well. In fact, all of these have 8 tentacles and 2, not very distinguishable, but they're like tentacles, but they're called arms. So it adds up to 10. They have 2 of these arms that are used in hunting. In the squid, they have hooks on the suckers, and in the cuttlefish, they don't have hooks on the suckers. So let's start with Nautilus. Okay, you can see these things, they tend to spend their daylight hours way down in the deep water below where light will penetrate out of the photic zone. And then at night, they'll migrate up, and they will hunt in the evening, okay, and all through the night. They hunt things close to the surface at night. They are called chambered nautilus because if you look at the shell, you can see these little chambers with that actually have um, an ability for gas to move into those different chambers, and they can regulate the amount of gas that goes into the chambers, and so they can keep themselves buoyant. It's quite a thick shell, but it doesn't sink because it's got a little bit of gas in it. And if you watch them swimming, you can see this funny little bobbing motion. So they go down, but they're never usually found below about 600 or 700 meters of depth, even during the day, because there comes a point where their shell will crush due to the pressure. So there's a crushing depth, and they don't go below that. And then because water is very viscous, and it would take a lot of energy to migrate up hundreds of meters every night before you start feeding, they can just regulate the amount of air within their shell, and that will allow them to just buoy up and up to the surface from down deep, and or sink back down at the end of the night, and they can use that as a method of neutral buoyancy. So those are the nautiloids, the cuttlefish or the Cephalopoda. You can see that they have the 8 tentacles and then the 2 hunting arms, which again, I'll post some links to cuttlefish feeding. And what happens is they will come up, and these 2 arms will just shoot out and grab from a great distance. They'll grab the prey, and these things don't have suckers on them, but they look a lot like a squid. Okay, so they have, this is the Teuthoidea, and you can see the very similar body design. Now, the fins on the squid are usually just at the very front of the mantle, whereas in the cuttlefish, the fins usually go the length of the mantle. Okay, the mantle is it's a tube. So what you eat when you eat a squid ring, it's just a slice of the tube. Okay, and it's round. It still has the visceral mass on the inside this tube. And here is the muscular foot that has evolved into these tentacles. They've got very big eyes. The largest eyes and the largest optic, or the largest nerve of any organism on the planet, is the nerve that runs. It's the optic nerve within the giant squid, and it's a single cell that's as wide as a millimeter wide. So it's a classic one for use in studies of nerve action. Let's see, what else can we say about the cuttlefish? So yes, the like I said, the squid have hooks on the end of on the suckers on the end of their hunting arms, and the cuttlefish do not. And here we see the difference in what a squid looks like versus a cuttlefish. So they may have these teeth on their suckers, or they may even have these giant hooks on the suckers. And so this is the top one is from a giant squid. So imagine that thing getting sucked into you and then being pulled into the beak to be eaten by beak bites alive. Some of these do have poisonous bites. In fact, most of the you've heard of blue-ringed octopus being very, very deadly, but most of the cephalopods have poison bites. Okay, so on the cuttlefish, these arms, the little pads at the end of the hunting arms, do not have teeth or hooks. They are simply suckers. Okay, so on the inside of a cuttlefish, they have this thing called a cuttle bone, and it gives support and structure, and also a place for muscles to attach in order so that the mantle can squeeze and push water out through the siphon to jet propel it. So the shape of the cuttlefish depends on this internal skeleton, but it's internal, it's inside the mantle. And in a squid, if you have done much fishing, you might have seen these little cellophane parts within the squid. This is a giant squid pen, but it's called a pen. It's interesting when you take a squid, if you do a dissection of a squid, you can take the pen and write your name with by dipping it in the ink sac that's within the mantle of the squid as well. So that is the much reduced, but still internal skeleton, internal shell of a squid. So cuttlebone in cuttlefish, squid pen in the squid. And then the octopus have no internal skeleton or bone or shell, which means that they can squeeze through any hole that their beak can fit through. So they're incredibly they can fit into some incredibly narrow little passages, and they can be very hard to keep in an aquarium because they'll wind up crawling through the outlet into the filter, or just crawling out through a tiny little gap in the tank top, and then they're gone. Find them on the floor or underneath a cabinet or something dead the next day. Big brained. They can learn to move through mazes at a faster rate than rats. Okay, so they can be very smart. Advanced eyesight, no shell, and of course they have no hooks on their tentacles. Okay. So here we can see kind of like another illustration of how the shell has evolved in mollusks. So you see like this is much like a scapopod, and the shell has curled up, remained a tube into the sort of nautiloids, and then you've got the squid pen in the squid, and into the cuttlebone in the cuttlefish, and the shell lost in the octopus. All right, so they swim quite quickly by using the mantle. They have jet propulsion where they blast water out of the mantle, and it goes out of a siphon, and that is only for fast swimming. And for slow swimming, they use their fins, and then the octopus crawl along. Okay, so the Nautilus actually have two lobes of the funnel. The squid and cuttlefish have one lobe, and the octopus have a mantle that can use jet propulsion, but they don't really swim with it. They mostly just crawl. And here is a picture of the siphon, and water is jetted out of this when the mantle contracts. All these rings of muscles contract and squeeze water out. And again, put the link to it, but there's another one of these animations to show how a squid siphon works. Okay. So the arms and tentacles, or tentacles and arms, depending on what terminology you're using. They're used for prey capture, and then they have a pair of poison glands. They've got a beak that once they bite where they essentially bite off big chunks of their prey, and then they have a radula, just like we saw in the other mollusks. And here's a nice picture of that mollusk radula. So they bite off a chunk and then rasp it into like sort of more digestible portions. Then, of course, the ink sac was for escape. Okay, so high metabolic rate, secondarily folded gills and closed blood-vascular system, extra hearts, haemocyanin. All of these are adaptations for fast movement. And